Hello, this is Julie Mansell from Gem Ministries International, and in this topic, this little chat, we're going to have a look at what a grant covenant is. You may recall I mentioned that there were three types of covenant: a grant covenant, a kingship covenant, and a vassal covenant. So we're going to, over the next three sessions, just briefly have a look at what each one of those means. So a grant covenant is one that's made between two very unequal parties. And we can see this quite clearly with Abraham and with David and with the new covenant. So suzerain and vassal covenant, and we'll talk about those later, were where the weaker parties was guaranteed certain rights and protected by the stronger party, with curses against anyone who infringed on those rights. It involved bestowing blessings and land and a dynasty or kingship, and it typically was as a reward for loyal service. And it was ratified in a ceremony where the stronger walked between two halves of the animal, essentially cutting the covenant alone. So we read in Genesis, the scripture where God made a grant covenant with Abraham and he walked through the two halves. And also when we see Jesus hanging on the cross, he made a grant covenant with us by taking the punishment and the penalty by hanging on the cross. So that's a grant covenant, and that is the best kind of covenant because there is no conditions. The parties come into the covenant, but they are protected fully by the stronger party of the covenant, which is God. In Abraham's case, when you read Abraham's story, you can see that many times he didn't always behave in the best way. He lied and told the Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister, and it was kind of half true because she was his half sister. But he didn't get punished by it. It was Pharaoh's household that got punished, and he did that twice because his covenant with God was not based on his behavior, and in the same way that our covenant with God in the new covenant is not based on our behavior, it's based on us coming into and under the blessings of that covenant. So that's a grant covenant, and it's very important that we grasp how wonderful it is to be under a grant covenant. David himself too was under a grant covenant. And as we read about David, God says he's a man after my own heart. Yet David committed murder and adultery and was lazy at times and did things that you perhaps think should have been punished by God, but they weren't. And that was because he was under the blessing of a grant covenant. So this is Julie Mansell from Gem Ministries International.